This is Tim Johnson, and it was last fall, the last Sunday in August, when Tropical Storm Irene came through and wreaked havoc in the scene in back of me here along the Whetstone Brook along William Street in Brattleboro. And since then, many volunteers from our community, from our region, have been involved with trying to set things right. We're not there yet. We're a lot closer than we were on a very rainy August day. And with me to tell you about the work of the Long-Term Recovery Committee in southeastern Vermont is the chair. In the center of these three lovely young ladies, Sandy Daly is the chair, and to her left, Mary Ann Wolf is the Disaster Recovery Service Coordinator for the committee, and on the right is Sue Graff, the Volunteer Coordination Subcommittee Chair. She also was with United Way of Windham County. Mary Ann works for Southeast Community Action, and Sandy is the chair of the Brattleboro Area Interfaith Clergy Association. I was hearing right before we started that all of you and your helpers have made just an inordinate number of calls trying to reach out to people, and maybe along with that you could tell us just what this committee is, how it was formed, and why you were making all those calls.
Sure. Well, right after the hurricane came through, a number of different organizations came together, called together by the United Way, to meet and talk about how we can respond. With the fire that had taken place at the Brooks House earlier, there were folks who had already sort of built a relationship from different service organizations and leaders in the community and so on. So there were maybe as many as 30 people sitting around the table initially saying, you know, how can we coordinate the different organizations, resources that we have to respond to the needs that are out there. And it took us, you know, I would say maybe close to a month to figure out what our charter, our organization, how we were going to move forward. And while we were doing that figuring out, we were also being led by FEMA and by the Red Cross as to how we could respond to the most immediate and pressing needs of people who didn't have housing, who didn't have food, who, you know, had the most sustained the most severe losses. But what we did create, we called the Southeastern Vermont Long-Term Recovery Committee, specifically focused on Irene at this point, and probably over the next 18 months or so, maybe even 2 years, we'll still be working on meeting people's unmet needs. But then we'll also be putting into place a structure that can be called on should we be faced with some sort of disaster in the future, which hopefully will help us be more prepared.
You know, you've raised a good point, because everything I've heard, and gosh, I wish my mom was still alive to confer with this, but 1927, 1938, big dates in Vermont history because of hurricanes and the damage that they wrought. By all stretches of the imagination, this compares with each of those dates, and you know, this really was over and above what any of us had thought we were going to be doing.
Yeah, it really is amazing. There were over 7,000 individual units, families or individuals, who registered with FEMA, and over 1,500 in Windham County, which is the area that we're serving, that we're dealing with. And that's a lot of people. That's a lot of households. The Windham County incorporates about 27 different communities, and so both in size and in scope, we're one of the most severely hit in the state. So
you reached all 1,500 people that had registered with FEMA?
Yeah, that was a task. Yeah, we had great groups of volunteers who did phone-a-thons. We developed a sort of a questionnaire to help understand what people's unmet needs were, and so folks were either reached by phone. If we couldn't reach them with 3 attempts by phone, we sent them a letter, we sent them an email, and just last Friday, we finally feel as though we've made contact with every one of them, one way or another.
My gosh, if I had been among those affected, I would have to wonder who is out there to help me, and that has to, if I've been hit by flooding, that's got to make the problem that much worse. How were they responding to the fact that somebody was actually calling to check on them and see what do you need?
For the most part, they were grateful to know someone was there. They had no idea that we were. So it was just a quick phone survey. We told them this was just an initial reach out and touch them. And so we asked their basic immediate needs, and then a little bit of what do you need long term. And we're seeing things from I have nowhere to live. Like Sandy said, you know, I need food. I'm not sure, but I think my septic's not going to be good in the spring. My well's contaminated. Especially in the Wilmington, Newfane area, we're seeing multiple problems. People's employment is affected, as well as their home. So it's not usually just one situation per family. It's several situations. There has not been a lot of easy fixes. So right now there are 5 case managers, in addition to a couple with SEPCA, the Southeastern Vermont Community Action, which is I'm employed by through a FEMA grant, and there's a few at Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust, as well as a few case managers at Starting Over Strong. So the easiest number is one I hope you'll put on your screen, which is my number, and I can direct anybody who needs help to the appropriate case manager.
And that number is? That number is toll-free 800-464-9951, or if you have internet access, it is sevca.org. Gosh, I know that we've always been self-sufficient for the most part as a state, as a people. But if you're faced with long-term job loss, if you're faced with major issues with your septic system or your water, if you're faced with even needing to get food, how do you cope?
To tell you the truth, a lot of Vermonters just took it on the chin. Said, yeah, it was tough. I dealt with it. Thank you so much for caring. Other folks, not so much. The first thing we asked everybody is, did you apply to FEMA? A lot of people needed help with FEMA appeals because that's one of the biggest pots of money, as in taking out a small business administration loan. From there, our long-term recovery group has some funds that can help people, as well as does the state. So there's a process. You start by sitting down with a case manager and mapping out your recovery plan. It's not our job to tell people what, we're just resource coordinators. We can lay out what's available, you know, help people figure out how to get from where they are now to a new normal. It's not going to be exactly the same as it was, but
one of the things that I'd like to mention also is that there's an organization called Starting Over Strong, SOS, and they have counselors who are trained in post-traumatic stress disorder, in the emotional and psychological stress that we experience. And you know, it's true, New Englanders like to be tough and say we can cope, but we absorb an awful lot that we don't like to acknowledge. And there is help out there, not just for the physical needs that you might have, the housing and employment needs, but also for the less tangible needs. And you can, again, if you get in touch with Mary Ann through that 800 number, she can refer you to an SOS counselor.
And of course, Starting Over Strong can be reached by another one of those great toll-free numbers, this one, 855-767-8800. And that is just so important, because if you don't deal with the fact that this has affected you emotionally and affected you mentally, this can really come back to haunt you and really hurt your relationships with people like employers, family members, other community members when you least expect it, and you don't know why it's happening, but gosh, it happens, and it's happening for a reason.
That's entirely correct. And a lot of people I've noticed everything that seemed crummy in their life before seems magnified now. You know, it's like when you're, you know, you lose your job, you go, and my mother's dead. You know, you lump it all together when it's actually separate. And so it seems overwhelming, and people have a tough time. How can I get back to a new normal? Well, SOS is there to help sort that bit out, because they're trained, and what we do is a little different. The case managers, we're more, all right, you need this, you need that, and so how are we going to get there? Where's the funding? And we try to piece it together.
So with that in mind, we had a lot of well-meaning people who wanted to just leap up and say, okay, I'm ready to help. This is a tragedy. I wasn't affected, but I want to do something. What can I do? And I guess it was the same after the fire, the Brooks House fire. So Sue Graff had to deal with all that and just make sure that you didn't have people tripping over each other, but yet legitimate needs were met.
Yes, the beautiful thing about this disaster was the response of neighbor helping neighbor, stranger helping stranger, and that's wonderful. And that spontaneous outpouring of volunteer support, in-kind donations, funds, is what sustained us through the initial relief phase, really. Recovery looks a little different. We had to take our time to get through the caseload of 1,500 people in order to really understand what people need now. So we're now in a position to accept the help of volunteers, skilled and unskilled, certainly construction issues. Anyone that has a particular skill to offer is welcome, as well as unskilled volunteers. But absolutely, there was an influx of people coming from within Vermont, outside the state, that really wanted to help, and we appreciated that. And the initial relief effort was amazing, and a credit to our resilience as a state, I think. Also the amazing infrastructure repair of bridges and roads from the state has to be commended, but it also provided sort of an illusion that everything was fine from the outset. And if you don't really know where to look, it can look like Vermont is fine. And we're not fine yet. We're getting there. And there's a strength and resiliency here that we're tapping into. But now is the time to continue the recovery effort. So if anyone would like to volunteer, visit the United Way website, unitedwaywindham.org. May 5th, which is typically Green Up Day, and it's been an annual garbage and debris cleanup day to beautify Vermont, has an Irene recovery component. So it's Green Up to Recover Day, Saturday, May 5th. And the United Way website is the place to register as a volunteer, and we'll match you with appropriate projects. However, beyond May 5th, we'll have ongoing needs for volunteers. So we've created a process now where we're getting information directly from case managers about what the needs are in our county, and we can match them with appropriate available volunteer support.
Nice idea. So you're able to handle a lot of different needs. Speaking specifically about Green Up Day, what sort of efforts would be related to Storm Irene here in Windham County?
Well, an extreme example is somebody literally has someone else's hot tub in their yard. The amount and the volume and the variety of debris can be defined really broadly, from hot tubs to, your neighbor's pieces of shingle or slate that fell off their roof. So certain homeowners, certainly as Marianne spoke to, that can-do attitude of Vermonters, lots of people dug in deep initially and did a lot of the work themselves. Some homeowners cannot do that. They don't have the capacity physically to help themselves. So certainly people have ongoing needs, and it's everything from simple yard work to more complicated hot tub removal. But the list is long and varied. So if you like a challenge and you like a variety, Green Up to Recover Day on May 5th is the place for you.
Well, in typical Vermont humor, one would say, gosh, always wanted a hot tub. Look, a whirlpool as well.
Yes.
But seriously, these are some very legitimate issues that need people power to solve. And how big is your committee itself, and from what different skills do you draw from?
Well, the way we have our committee structured right now, there's a group that's involved in community assessment, and they've been most focused at the start here with contacting people, trying to get a sense of what the needs are. And then we have the Resource Coordination Committee, which are the case managers as well as the various social service organizations that help connect the resources that are available both locally and special state funds and federal funds. So they're very busy right now making those connections. And then we have the Volunteer Coordination Committee, which Sue's chairing, that is not only dealing with trying to set up what we're calling as low-hanging fruit or the easy projects, but also trying to describe and get a better sense of what the more complicated projects are. And we may well be either hiring or setting up or developing a construction management committee or group to be able to help determine more clearly the estimates, the materials, the permits, the things that we'll need for a more complex response. And that will also involve coordinating groups that are from all over the nation who want to come help. And of course, with the warm weather coming, this is the time to be able to receive them. So such things as setting up housing is something that different faith communities are looking at. Can their houses of worship also be hot places of hospitality for groups coming in? So there's a lot of pieces of it to put together. There are lots of ways for people to participate, not only volunteering by rolling up their sleeves, but also people who have good organizational skills could volunteer to be the leader of a project for one day, for one project, because you need somebody in charge, so to speak. We need people who, in the trades, who can help us to understand what some of the processes and needs are for the complicated. So people can volunteer for very discrete projects and say, well, I have one Saturday this summer, I'm willing to donate or something. What can I do to help? And again, that would be coordinated with the team. And I don't want to underestimate the fact that funds are always needed. So, you know, if all of those other ways of helping out don't work, we do have a fund that we're using and a request form that people can fill out if they have needs that can best be met by funding.
You know, you're right. Vermont has received a lot of support from FEMA. A lot of businesses, a lot of well-meaning individuals have dug in deep because they know of the need. But there's still, you can't possibly come up with enough to do everything, especially in the manner that you would think should be done. So there is still a need for money. Where can that be sent?
The United Way is acting as the fiscal agent for us, so that, again, if you visit their website, you can see how donations can be made, either online or by sending in donations. There are also going to be different events where we try to be present so that people can make donations, such as the Strolling of the Heifers. We're going to have a presence at the home show this weekend. Anything that's going on in the community where we can remind people that there are those there who want to help. And while I think of it, just because you didn't register with FEMA doesn't mean that you can't ask for help, because we're here for everybody in Windham County. So don't hesitate. I know it's not Vermont-like to ask for help, but the help is there.
I was just thinking that.
The help is there, so don't hesitate.
And of course, some of us look with a jaundiced eye on, I'm from the federal government and I'm here to help, and they might accept help more readily from their neighbors rather than somebody with a federal badge.
Absolutely. I've had several recently that came to me by neighbors, but just, my neighbor was sick, but she didn't apply to FEMA. She just didn't want to have anything to do. And I'm like, okay. And I called one woman today, and she said, well, why do you want to come out to see me? I said, I'm trying to find funding to fix your roof. She goes, okay, how about 2 o'clock tomorrow? I'm like, it's like, I'm just a local person trying to help. And you're right, people definitely feel more at ease, I would say, than FEMA's coming to town. It seems a little scary. And it's a bunch of paperwork, too.
That it is. On top of the fact that you might have had a house destroyed or damaged, you've got to deal through a mountain of paperwork where people get scared by that too.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, after you apply to FEMA, the federal government's primary source of assisting you is an SBA loan. Not only do people not get that because it stands for Small Business Administration, but they do disaster loans to homeowners and renters. People just don't get it, and it's like applying for a first-time mortgage. So you're traumatized, you don't understand, you think I can't afford another loan, and then there's this voluminous paperwork. So a lot of people didn't apply for the loans, which are low interest, and it's not a bad deal. And it's okay. Call us. We may be able to help. We hope we can help.
And the other end of this, volunteers. Anybody of any size, shape, age that really can do something, anything, it's all needed.
Absolutely. There are projects that are appropriate for adults, appropriate for families. Certainly we're going to do screening of volunteers and of projects and match them appropriately, but any and all volunteer support is welcome and appreciated. Even
something as simple as, gosh, I may not be able to bend my back all day, but I can cook up a meal for maybe 100 volunteers amassed at one point or another.
Absolutely. We're actively recruiting what we're calling site leaders. So people who can coordinate volunteers, coordinate supplies, make sure the volunteers are getting what they need, the homeowners getting what they need, to really be an on-site presence, and to ensure that everyone's needs are met and that volunteers have a good experience as well. Of course, we want to help everyone affected, and we know that the homeowners appreciate the support, but we want to make sure that the volunteers are sensitive to the needs of the homeowner and that they're working in someone's very private place. So we want to be sensitive to that, so absolutely.
So a question for all of you. I know that how the storm affected me is at various points I just felt on information overload and wondering whether I could continue to cope. I mean, I have, but that has got to go through everybody's head. How did this storm and the work that you're doing since then affect all of you?
Golly, didn't expect that. I think when we first got the FEMA list, well, I know, I'm not thinking it, and they will concur, that I felt absolutely frantic. Who's out there? Because we got the FEMA list the week before Thanksgiving. And I thought, who's not safe and warm and dry? Of these 1,500 names, who isn't safe and warm and dry? And I just was like working around the clock, worried that there were people out there in not a good spot. As we've contacted people, I feel a little calmer. We've got a handle on it. We know that where people are and more or less what they need. So, but initially I was kind of frantic.
Understandable.
I think one of the things that I've experienced the most has been frustration in trying to be in that place of tension between being a responsible steward of help and just wanting to help, just wanting to get out there and help people. And it just feels like the wheels turn so slowly, and yet we do want to make sure that we're using resources in an appropriate way and in the most helpful way and in a way that stretches them over the most needs. So I think for me that probably has been one of the most enduring emotions, is just wanting to make a difference and yet knowing that we have to go through the processes. And that's probably in some ways very similar to what homeowners experience, of just wanting to get the help, wanting to get things back to normal. And it takes time, and it takes patience and persistence, and sometimes it takes being gentle on yourself and just saying, okay, I'm just going to go for a walk, and allowing yourself the space to breathe.
And Sue?
I continue to be encouraged by the sheer volume of help, of resources, of people that have stepped forward, organizations that have stepped forward. this was an unprecedented disaster, and it's called on every conceivable resource that we have, and it's enormously encouraging to see that collaborative spirit in action and that can-do spirit in action, and see organizations work together that don't typically work together, to see first responders and emergency responders help us think through the recovery phase, and to rely on assets and resources that we typically don't need to rely on. So for me, and I have the sort of a bigger picture view. I'm not, I give Marianne and all the case managers all the credit in the world for doing the frontline work. And for a long time, she's been very humble. She was the first and the only case manager that we had for Windham County for a long time, and is now supervising all the case management. So she was enormously helpful and on the front lines really early on. I have the luxury of helping to administer funding and coordinate volunteers at this point, but I was enormously encouraged by just the outpouring of offers to help and ways that people work together and continue to work together.
Well, I am just impressed by the effort that your group has put forth, and thank you for the opportunity to share your stories and what needs to still be done in Windham County. It can be done because of the strength of people like the three of you. Thank you very, very much. Marianne Wolf, Sandy Daly, Sue Graff. Now you know what you must do. Give a call if you're in need of help. 800-464-9951 or United Way of Windham County, and that of course is unitedwaywindham.org. This is Tim Johnson. This was an event none of us thought we'd have to see in our lifetime. Let's come out stronger after Irene. Thanks for joining us.